Hello and welcome to In Focus, where we take a look at the most captivating human interest stories of the week. I'm Sally Jastrzębska. The stories we'll present today are quite bittersweet. We'll see how people can prevail despite the odds and show their strength in the face of tragedy. On the other hand, we'll also see those who are not ashamed to profit from the misfortunes of others. However, luckily, they are in minority. We start off with the story of Zbigniew Herbert, one of Poland's most prominent dissident poets of the communist era. Since 2024 was named the UNESCO Year of Herbert, we take this opportunity to take a closer look at his life and work. Our reporter Natalia Komarow has more.
Zbigniew Herbert is one of the poets whose work Polish students read endlessly in school. He teaches them about the difficulty of navigating the realities of communist Poland. Go upright among those who are on their knees, among those with their backs turned and those toppled in the dust. Be courageous when the mind deceives you, be courageous. In the final account, only this is important.
Inspiracje mu dostarczały życie.
He was inspired simply by life. He was a rationalist. Well, maybe an idealist, but with very strong rational undertones. He believed everything in life should be rational. He was not a romantic, even if some tried to find romanticism in his work. He drew from life, from nature. There's this poem, Stone. It's just a description of a stone, but he put life into that stone, and in a way the stone is alive, since it's a part of the natural world. Poetry was the most important part of his life.
We are at the headquarters of the Polish Academy of Sciences to meet with the custodian of Zbigniew Herbert's archives.
Zbigniew Herbert was born in 1924 in Lviv to a family of intellectuals. His father was a director in a bank. They had comfortable lives. During World War II, Herbert experienced two totalitarian regimes: communism between 1939 and 41, and then fascism after 41. Herbert's parents knew he was at risk of being taken to a German labor camp, so in March 1944 they decided to leave Lviv and move to Krakow. That's where they spent the war's final months. After the war, the Herberts relocated to Sopot, but Zbigniew stayed in Krakow to study. He graduated from the Academy of Commerce and began studying law at the Jagiellonian University. Later, he continued studying law in Toruń and graduated in 1951. In 1951, the Toruń philosophy department was shut down, and so Herbert had to move to Warsaw. He began collaborating with the Christian publishing house, Pax. He wrote a lot for Pax Press, mostly editorials, to be able to make a living. And he debuted his poetry in 1950 in a Pax-related magazine. But it hadn't been a debut he wanted. His friend had simply printed a bunch of poems that Herbert had sent him to read. His actual debut happened in 1956. It was a poetry collection titled String of Light. It was very well received by the critics. A year later, he published his second book of poetry, and it had firmly established him in the Polish literary scene. These books found their way abroad and drew the attention of German translators. Herbert left Poland for the first time in 1958. He would spend over 2 years in France, Britain and Italy. His trip to Italy in 1959 proved particularly important in Herbert's biography, as this is where he had looked for inspiration. Well, he didn't look for it. Inspiration came itself after he had visited Italian cities, experienced Italian painting, and gazed upon Italian architecture. What grew out of this trip was his tome of essays titled Barbarian in the Garden, published in 1962.
Polish intelligentsia during communist times had to migrate mostly to Paris. Was Herbert a part of that world?
He wanted to live in Poland, to write for a Polish audience. He called himself an apostole on a work trip, which is what he considered his foreign travels to be, to go to the sources of European culture and bring to Polish audiences what he or she couldn't experience themselves. During the very first trip to Paris in 1958, Herbert met Jerzy Giedroyć, the editor-in-chief of Parisian Kultura. But he refused to publish in Kultura because he wanted to be able to return home. Had he agreed to print his poem in either Kultura or in the London-based magazine Wiadomości, he wouldn't have been allowed back into Poland.
Miłosza spotyka już w 50.
Herbert met Czesław Miłosz in 1958 and they quickly became friends. Miłosz became Herbert's first professional English translator.
Jednak panowie podczas złoto zakrapiania.
However, one time during a lavish dinner at Miłosz's home in Berkeley, these two poets had a serious fight about politics. A warm friendship had soured into nothing more than mutual respect.
Ja traktowałem, kiedy odkryłem Herberta,
For me, Herbert was a young Polish poet that I had to promote in the English-speaking world. At the time, we were close friends because Herbert lived in Paris. We drank plenty of wine together. Later, our friendship deteriorated.
Herbert wanted to draw more from within himself and so created a special character behind which he could hide to distance himself, Mr. Cogito. This is a character stuck between strong convictions and endless doubts, between idealism and nihilism, unable to accept the world as it was, but forced to exist in it.
Stworzył tą postać pana Kogito.
He created the persona of Mr. Cogito, which today is attached to his actual self. I would say that Mr. Cogito was the tome of poetry entirely shaped by him and for himself. He is almost exposing himself in there.
Jemu
W latach 60.
The first poems involving Mr. Cogito were written in the 60s. Herbert creates this character to channel the dilemmas experienced by a contemporary man. First of all, this is a man in Poland, at the time forced to live under an unacceptable political regime. But he is also a man of Western culture, whose problems can be universal. Herbert searches for answers through poetry.
What can we still learn today from Mr. Cogito?
Pan Kogito
Mr. Cogito is a man who thinks and who doubts.
myślącym i wątpiącym.
The calligraphy competition. Mr. Cogito broke the record. He wrote the most beautiful letter B. He won Petrarchan laurels with the letter B. History's storm sadly devoured the masterpiece.
W poezji Herberta
In Herbert's poetry, there's a lot about culture, painting, art, philosophy. He invokes his favorite Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius. Art inspired such poems as Nike Who Hesitates.
spotkanie ze sztuką będzie
In his poetry, just like in his essays, Herbert always takes the side of the less fortunate. Poetry is a unique way of fighting against totalitarianism, as well as an attempt to circumvent censorship. For Herbert, the Polish reader was always the main target of his writing.
czytelnicy obcojęzyczni.
But readers in Germany, the UK, and later France received Herbert's poetry very well, as it resonates with everyone.
Ja z moim mężem spędziłam.
You know, I spent 30 years with my husband. There were different stages, of course, but most of this time we lived abroad. Sometimes it was hard, sometimes we didn't have much money. But for Herbert, the material aspects of life were unimportant. For a creator, what he eats or wears is truly irrelevant. I'm talking about so-called true artists. It's difficult to live with that. I was no artist. I was just with him. But still, I realized early on that there was no chance for a normal home life. So maybe this is a warning for anybody dreaming of being the wife of a painter, poet, author. It's really hard, and it's hard to stay together as well. But you get compensated with how unique that person is and all you receive from them.
Zbigniew Herbert passed away in July 1998.
1958 roku.
Co do Herberta, to przecież śmierć takiego...
Regarding Herbert, the death of such a poet is much more important than the death of great statesmen or presidents, because in many years nobody will remember the names Clinton, Kohl or Yeltsin. But Herbert's poetry will remain, and it will resonate for a long, long time. Entire generations of Polish students will read his poems at school for years to come.
We all care about the environment, but it seems that for some, Poland is still a country where no nature preservation laws apply. In our upcoming video, you'll see how the natural environment is still being abused here in the heart of Europe. Let's have a look at Anna Błądek's report.
Hands stained with blood, birds are being killed right here, where they should be the most safe.
Miedwie is a Natura 2000 region. It's also a so-called Bird Special Protection Zone known as OSA. This enclave, this safe space where waterfowl and mudbirds should have been able to live and rest during their journeys, is where they were ruthlessly killed with no regard for the rules of the art of hunting and for Polish law.
This is our national heritage. Someone from abroad just comes and savagely kills them. This is simply unacceptable. This is a massacre.
This matter gained traction after conservationists found photos and recordings of hunts in Poland on Italian hunting agency websites. In these, you can see mass-scale killings of birds, including protected species.
A limitless slaughter of birds, geese and ducks.
Here we can see a hole of 10 whooper swans. This is a highly protected species and an endangered one in Poland. The law has absolutely been violated in this place. Here we can see white-fronted geese which are under protection in Miedwie.
In one photo, we saw between 30 to 40 dead gadwolves, which is a strictly protected species. We currently estimate that we have around 300 to 600 gadwolf specimens in this area. So if one hunt killed 30 of them, this is 10% of the entire population. This is huge.
The environmental impact this has is catastrophic. In terms of the law, there is a clear conflict here. We are dealing with something protected that is being hunted. We have a protected species that is being permanently flushed out.
Our struggle with hunters from foreign countries has been going on for years. I've personally spoken with some of them. When I asked them to show their permits, they refused to do so and simply leave.
As it turns out, the Italians have been permitted to hunt in Miedwie by the local Wash Hunting Association from Pyrzyce.
Hunting is legally permitted in this area. No one has forbidden it. I don't see any indication that it would be banned. This goes against what I believe in.
Absolutnie polowania takie nie powinny mieć tu miejsca, dlatego że one wpływają negatywnie wielowątkowo, tak? Bo oprócz tego właśnie, że bezpośrednio te ptaki są zabijane, to również te ptaki są płoszone.
Many activities are forbidden in bird enclaves, as they can disrupt the animals. Meanwhile, here someone can show up and just shoot around during the night. This has the same effect as if you toast a firecracker into this place. The birds are startled awake, they are sent flying. In such a case, we would label this barbaric and it would be denounced by everyone. But a fired shoot which has the same effect is being ignored, hidden and even tolerated.
The law, which should be defending the birds, instead permits hunts in protected areas. The hunts were organized for the entire hunting season, so almost for half a year. This is how the Italians promoted their business.
It's estimated that if 600 to 800 are invited to take part in the event for a weekend, then hundreds of birds are affected. Multiply this by 25 weekends and this amounts to thousands or tens of thousands of birds killed in a single area. This is inconceivable.
To są ilości przemysłowe, hurtowe.
Ustawa Prawo łowieckie daje dość dużą dowolność.
The hunting law bills gives hunters a lot of freedom if they possess very basic hunting permits. They are often allowed to hunt birds without any restrictions.
In the videos published by Italian hunting agencies, we can see many laws being violated. This concerns some very basic stuff, like the requirement to shoot solely at identified targets.
After analyzing the evidence, we found several violated laws. This is the killing of a huge number of protected biospecies and serious damage to the environment. This is hunting via illegal methods, such as making hides in reeds. This is hunting without a guide. This is hunting without dogs, as none were present in the evidence. This is also something required by law.
My colleagues and I are also outraged by some of the scenes shown in the footage, but I am unable to fully confirm whether they took place in our area.
Hunting agencies advertise themselves in various countries. They collect photos to prop their businesses up. Some of them, yeah.
No więc wiadomo, że ktoś tu łamał prawo. To jak wy pilnujecie tego obszaru jako Straż Łowiecka?
The Hunting Watch here handles the entire West Pomeranian region. I can say that we've been investigating the issue. And I think that this will be handed over to the regional prosecutor's office.
We are currently distancing ourselves from this case. We think that this evidence was likely purposefully gathered to discredit Polish hunters. The accusations that this incident allegedly took place in our hunting circuit have not been confirmed. There is no indication that this is the case. There is no evidence that proves this happened in our area.
Nie ma przesłanek do tego, nie ma dowodu, żeby stwierdzić jednoznacznie, że to było na naszym terenie.
In Gizin, on the opposite shore, I saw huge nets of hunted birds in autumn. Of course, those responsible were not from Poland. Only their license plates were of Italy, if memory serves.
The Italian issue is being investigated online by the police and the Hunting Watch. As early as September, you could still find offers posted by Italian agencies, but Polish hunters aren't without fault here. This specimen will be left to die alone, suffering.
W okrutnym cierpieniu. Pytanie dlaczego?
The question remains, why?
Over the past few days, Poland has been hit by a disastrous flood wave. Although the whole country has come together to help the victims, there have also been those who have tried to profit from the disaster. Marcin Nowak has this report.
Kradną alkohol. To jest
We found some looters as soon as we got here. They were wandering around between the buildings, in the neighborhoods, and they just looted everything. They broke into homes, they were casing them, they tried the knobs, even if people were around.
The flood has caused losses estimated at 300 million zloty in Stronie Śląskie. The flood wave hit this area with doubled strength after the town's dam burst. The residents stood their ground against the water. Piotr immediately went to help his neighbors.
We went to help the neighbors right away, because that's what you do when they're in danger, especially since the water's flown down towards us. If we help our neighbors, then we also help ourselves in a way. Though I wasn't all that certain that we'd handle it. I had hoped that it would simply work out, but this all happened in a matter of minutes. This water flowed so quickly, there was no chance of stopping it. Really, it's not like it was rising by a centimetre every hour. It happened in minutes, 5 minutes, 5 5 centimeters. That's how quickly the water rose. So we started to put everything up on shipping pallets, including livestock, poultry. We brought everything up to the attic. We hadn't expected this much water. There would be a 2-meter wave against which we wouldn't have a chance. Everything was flooded. It didn't just burst through the windows, it broke them along with the walls. It was such a powerful force, you can't even imagine.
Piotr managed to escape with his family at the very last moment. Fortunately, his home had survived the deluge. But once the water level in Stronie Śląskie had dropped, it turned out that many places were left without power. Darkness reigned in the streets, and fear entered people's homes. Fear of a different kind than the water.
Looters showed up almost immediately. They weren't just curious passers-by who wanted to take a photo or two. These were strangers, 2 suspicious-looking men. They wandered between the buildings and yards, looting. People have already been telling stories about how someone had been loitering around at their neighbors, that they had tried to take things or something. My sister told me this. Well, that he had apparently threatened someone with a knife.
Piotr unfortunately experienced this fear firsthand with his family, when a few days ago he noticed a suspicious vehicle parked in front of his house.
The entire time we were worried about someone just getting in, since everyone had been talking about looters and thieves. So we set flashlights up on poles. I went to bed thinking that if someone does try to break in, they'll just have to break the window, and then we can defend ourselves somehow. At 5 a.m. I was woken up by a car near the house. Since there was no power, it was dark, the lamps were off. A guy had pulled up in a van. My wife woke up soon after. The day before they had brought over some pretty good flashlights, so we started to shine them at the van. A man was hiding in the bushes. We asked, "What do you want from us? What are you looking for?" And then he responded in a very vulgar way. He first said that he had come to bring some things to the church, but I said that was an odd thing to be doing at 5 in the morning. He said that's just what he was asked to do. I told him to leave because the police would soon be coming. Then he started to throw insults at me, "Shut your trap," and so on. My wife was very scared and called the police. I took the flashlight. We started shining in on the van. There was something written on it. I told my son to film it so we had some sort of proof that people were showing up. The guy started shouting again, telling us to turn the light off. I asked him what his problem was, since it was impossible that someone who had just wanted to help others would be so aggressive. We shined the flashlight over there a few more times. He wasn't able to reverse and kept on cursing. Terrible situations, just terrible.
Police have recorded several cases of looting, but flood victims say the actual number of instances is much higher.
People don't talk about it as much as they did before, probably because previously they would drive around in vans and threatened people with knives and break into homes. They jiggled doorknobs even if people were around, even if these were duplexes. If elderly people were around, they didn't care about anything. They just waltzed in and stole whatever they could. They stole anything. They later got clever and showed up with Czech license plates for the most part. When people started taking photos, they took the plates off the abandoned, flooded cars so that no one would be able to recognize them. It became a real problem at night. People were scared because there was no lighting. There was nothing. If they had to leave their homes, they did so in large groups, in 3 cars, 4 to 5 people in each one. This is really terrifying. Most of the incidents occurred in towns, since you could reach them on proper roads. The army got involved afterwards, but it's a bit better now. A sort of neighborhood watch was created in Stronie Śląskie, and that helped.
The army patrols the streets with night vision, but the locals have set up neighborhood watches anyway. People are trying to maintain order themselves during the night, but it's still not enough.
We have almost everything that we need: food, water, cleaning equipment, but we still need one very important thing to protect our town: solar lamps. This is about the lootings. The looters come at night. They case the houses during the day to know where to steal. If we have solar lamps which we can charge during the day and use at night, there will be some sort of help. They might scare them away, since if they approach and the lights turn on, they'll run away. So if you'll be running any sort of transport, I'd like to ask you to add solar lamps. It can be 100 of them, 200, even 300. There'll be a lot of help everywhere. Please. People have lost everything here, or almost everything, and they have to put what remains in front of their homes. Some of the things have been heavily damaged, but others have been saved and have been taken out for the duration of the restoration efforts. They won't be able to put them back in time, and they're already showing up. I won't say who, but they're showing up to steal.
Courts are speeding up their decisions, and the actions are being treated as brazen theft. Although the situation is improving day by day, many flood victims are still afraid to sleep at night.
Some of the looters have already been given sentences. It's been really rough. The nights are the worst, but once more neighbors have returned, we'll feel safer. You had 3 of us in one house, one neighbor over there in the next house. And who are you going to call if something happens? There's no one around, just darkness. You'd be scared to leave your house, wouldn't you? It's so sad. All this time we've been fighting for, I'm not even sure, just so that we can sleep safe at night.
And with this, we conclude this episode of In Focus. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.